Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Today, I've got another story for you. It's called I Think I Killed a Nephilim in Afghanistan. But before we get to that, first of all, I just want to mention a book I just started reading. Obviously, it's very popular. I'm not expecting to be the first one who's ever mentioned this book to you, obviously. But it's Dungeon Crawler Carl. I've got probably only like 20 pages in, honestly. But so far, it's pretty good. Can't say I've never read anything like it, because I'm a big fan of like webtoons and stuff like that, you know what I'm saying? So, like Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint, that's a webtoon. That seems pretty similar to it, but this one has its kind of own unique flair, and I think it's, American made, which most of those types of stories aren't. So I'm hoping there's a bigger play on it too, but there's a lot to read there, so I'm excited to get into that and really read a bunch of that book. I'll let you know next episode too how I'm still feeling about it, because that probably record that in about a week. But yeah, just wanted to mention that while I was just starting out the episode. But now we'll get into the story. Well, I guess we're going to get into the author first, because that would make sense to get a little bit of context up in here about who we're reading from. So I did get this from the subreddit Tales from the Creeps. It is by somebody named Lopsided Ad 2608, and there's underscores in between the words. I will obviously have this linked. I'll have his account linked, and I'll have the post linked in the description. It seems like he's posted a few times in this subreddit, and from what I can tell, he is, former Armyman, because his description is Filipino-American creator sharing my culture and stories from my Army career. So, although he's kind of a smaller creator, hasn't wrote a lot of stuff, it doesn't look like. Actually, this looks like the only story he's wrote, which I was wrong about that, because all these other ones are the single chapters, whereas he reposted them all together in Tales from the Creeps. But yeah, I am really excited to get into this. I think this title is awesome. Again, I love stuff with like Nephilim and biblical creatures, even though I'm not the most knowledgeable about stuff like that. Like, obviously, I watch Creepcast too. I'm getting this off the Creepcast subreddit for stories. But yeah, I can't claim to be the most knowledgeable about any of this stuff, really, because I am only just getting into it within this last year. My knowledge is basically limited to stuff that Mr. Creepypasta has read and Creepcast has read, and the stuff I've read on here. But obviously, I'm improving. I'm learning stuff as I go along. I'm hopefully getting better at reading, especially speaking out loud. I'm really bad at it. I do try and stay away from the ums, but they come. I promise they come, even if sometimes I try and cut them out, especially in that one audio only that I did on Spotify. That one, those ums were everywhere. But, yep, without further ado, we'll get into the story. Alright, I'm trying to get my hat straight, but I'm not able to. I'm sure you saw me in my last clip too trying, but I think it's a little better. Whatever. We're getting into the story. So, I Think I Killed a Nephilim in Afghanistan. Chapter 1. I was a saw gunner in the 40th Infantry Division stationed at a forward operating base in Kandahar Province, Afghanistan, from 2002 to 2003. It was an 18-month deployment, and we were already 7 months in when all this started. My assistant gunner / ammo bitch, Dan, came over to my coat at around midnight. He shook me awake gently and said in a hushed tone, "Hey, bruh, get up, it's our shift." I groaned and blurted out, "Bro, I was just having a dream about my girl." I saw his eyebrow curl up in confusion. "You don't have a girl." "I know, nobody loves me." I shot him a middle finger and started lacing up my boots and putting my blouse on. The sides of my plate carrier velcroed tight against my ribs, and my Kevlar slung on top of my head. I picked up my 249 and we shuffled outside. It's strange. This place was undoubtedly a shithole, but the sky out at night was brighter than any place I've been since. Even the darkness of night seemed richer, like a velvet sheet poked with 1,000 little holes. I kept my eyes up as I stumbled towards the watchtower to the right of the entry control point. That's pretty cool. I know about light pollution and everything, but I've never actually been somewhere, I think, clear enough to be clear of light pollution. I'm obviously not in a big city or anything, but I haven't, like Alaska. I would love to live in Alaska. That's a lie. I would not love to live in Alaska, but like the Aurora Borealis, stuff like that in the sky, stars, it's all really pretty. It's just going somewhere specifically for that is going to be expensive and probably not worth it in my opinion. If I'm going on a hike or something, hell yeah, but you know what I'm saying. I don't know. I've never gone, so hey, we'll continue now. It was a shabby little building about the size of those concrete pillars that hold up bridges. Its shitty walls were reinforced with pieces of rebar that randomly jutted out just enough that you had to point your chin down to avoid getting hit in the face. I made my way up the sand-caked ladder and took my seat at the observation deck. Another typical night in hell. Then here's a picture on the screen, which I can pull up for you. Whoa! It just appeared suddenly. Whoa! I'm not good at this whole editing thing, but this is the image he's talking about. It looks like it's him and what looks like a buddy in, I assume, Afghanistan, doing their military stuff. Yeah, it's a pretty cool picture. If I had to guess, this is a real picture of him and his friend, but obviously I'm not sure about that. Yeah, it's pretty neat actually. Just seeing someone So here's that picture. It appears to be, I assume, Dan and him pulling security at night. If I had to guess, this is a real picture, which I think is pretty neat. And if I had to guess again, obviously I'm not sure about this, but I would assume this one right here is the actual author. I would assume that's his real friend, which is why the face is blurred. But I think that's pretty neat, actually. Giving a real picture of a real experience you've had and using it towards your story online, I think is a pretty cool concept, because a majority of them that you see are completely fake. So I like what they did here, and knowing the guy's background makes it even cooler. So I am glad that I read the author thing before reading the story. Right, but continuing on past this. To the left of the fob was a small rocky outcropping about 5 clicks away. To the right was a little village about 7 clicks away, with about 20 families and heavy Taliban resistance. And to our front was a mountain range about 1 click away. Our FOB was strategically located at the base of the mountain so that the likely avenues of approach from the Taliban would either be from the village or along the road that separated them from us. Which, here, if you didn't realize, a click is a measure of distance that the military uses, and the FOB that it's talking about was the forward operating base that I mentioned earlier. Just wanted to point that out just in case anyone didn't know, but continuing on. I checked my sectors of fire, did a quick radio check, and then settled into my position, looking down my sight. Dan sat there next to me with his arms folded up against his chest. It was quiet, which was always a good sign. Every 5 minutes or so, I would dart my eyes to the left to check the rocky outcrop, and then fix them on the village. Then up towards the mountain and down towards the road. Left, right, up, down, wait. Left, right, up, down, wait. Left, right, up, Wait a minute. Hey Dan, are you seeing that? He leaned forward and squinted his eyes. It looks like a ball of light. I saw a pulse of orange and yellow from near the top of the mountain. I grabbed my radio. Lionheart 6, this is Lionheart 2. We have a light on top of Mount Kilo. Azimuth 234 degrees at 1100 meters. Over. There was a long pause. A raspy voice mumbled over the line. Lionheart 2, this is Lionheart 6. Can you get a positive ID on the light source? Over. Roger that. Stand by. Over. I flipped down the night vision goggles on my helmet. A flash of greens and white shot into my eyes as I peered into the mountain. Too far. All I could see was a small ball of light steadily bouncing across the darkness. Too irregular to be a flashlight, too strange in movement to be a vehicle. It looked like a torch. My face contorted in confusion. What the fuck kind of Haji is using a torch in the middle of the night, less than 1,200 meters from a U.S. Army base? I kept my eyes fixed on the mountain. This dude's gotta be out of his fucking mind. Well, no more Man Love Mondays for you. Lionheart 6, this is Lionheart 2. It appears to be a torch or flame of some sort, moving laterally across the mountaintop. Individual's not cresting the mountaintop, so I can't get a positive ID, but wait, the light just disappeared. Over. What was this? It had to be a huge flame for me to see it so clearly from this distance. Maybe it was one of the villagers? No, that didn't make any sense. It had to be an enemy combatant. Maybe the Taliban were trying to set up for an attack, but why did it go out? They couldn't have seen me from the distance, even if they had NODs too. The radio kicked back on. Lionheart 2, this is Lionheart 6. Good copy. Keep your eyes fixed on the location and draw a sector sketch of where they appear to have gone. Turn it at the end of your shift. We'll send a patrol out tomorrow night. Over. Roger. Over and out. Dan and I sat there staring for a while. What was that? If it were a Taliban group, where did they come from? The intel guys told us that the mountain was so steep and treacherous that it required mountaineering gear to scale. Even if they had the equipment, they didn't have the training to do night ops and climb a 1,000-foot cliff. That's pretty fucking crazy, man. Dan ripped his beanie off and rubbed his head. His palm rubbing his scalp sounded like sandpaper in the night. I bet you it was one of those villagers, man. I knew there had to be a mole. They probably housed them and then sneaked up on them on the mountain. There's probably tunnels or some Viet Cong shit they made. I gritted my teeth as I went on complaining. I was pissed off. We'd been here 7 months already and gotten shot at nearly every day without actually having stopped any insurgents. It seemed like for every one we killed, 6 more would pop up. If there were any, we were gonna get them. But still, I felt weird. This place was a war zone, but no one uses torches here. Were they doing some ritual sacrifices in the mountains, carrying torches and killing goats? There had to be an explanation. There was no way any human being would be up on that mountain at night without being afraid of us coming to get them. It turns out I was right. It wasn't a human being, and it wasn't afraid of us. So here, it kind of reminds me of, in the story Feed the Pig, sorry, not Feed the Pig, The Black Farm, which is the novel version of Feed the Pig. I read that recently, and that, I don't think it's a spoiler, but if you haven't read the book and you're going to read the book, be wary of this. Again, I don't think this is a spoiler. It comes up, but either way, just skip a couple of seconds if you're gonna. But there are lights at the top of the mountain in there, which it's one red and one blue light. And those are told to be angels, which this story, obviously, from the title, we know that light right now is going to be a Nephilim, which I'm not sure if this person read that book and thought it was a cool idea, wanted to do it in a different way, or if just coincidentally they both did that, which I know happens. Either way, I think that is an awesome idea for both people to have had. Gonna keep it honest with you. Completely lost my train of thought. My fault. But I'll continue from where I remember being. On top of the idea, it's an awesome idea. I think it's awesome being an angel just in a spot that's within reach of man, but at a part that's going to be difficult to reach for men. Well, by men I mean mankind. I apologize. But no, for a person to get up there, it's going to take a lot of work and effort, and it's going to be difficult. But if I had to guess, once again, they're going to go up there, just like in the Black Farm. I think this is a very neat idea. I've always enjoyed stuff like this. So I'm going to continue on reading Chapter 2 now. Chapter 2. So who do you think would win in a fist fight? Hank Hill or the dad from Malcolm in the Middle? Right, I know I just started. Fucking the dad from Malcolm in the Middle. Because, I don't know, I like that actor. Oh, but you gotta think about Hank Hill's King of the Pill. You know that AI song? Not big on AI, but I am big on stupid-ass AI songs like that. Hank Hill is kind of a gangster. Yeah, final answer, Hank Hill. But in a popularity contest, I'm choosing Malcolm in the Middle's dad. Hal's the GOAT, Heisenberg, and... oh, shit. Walter White. Dude, it completely blanked. Walter White, Heisenberg, he's the GOAT. But Hank Hill, he's a gangster. Yep. Alright, continuing on. I shook my head as I heard Dan's dumbass question from the ring mount of our Humvee. It was around 7 in the morning, and the day was already getting hot. We were 15 minutes out the gate and had already passed our last checkpoint before reaching the village. I pivoted the ring mount and pointed my 249 at the first structure to my right. It was a makeshift terracotta house that had probably been here since the birth of Christ. We referred to them affectionately as shithouses. This was partially due to their construction and partially due to their smell. 1, then 2, then a dozen houses loomed ahead of us. We pulled our vehicles into a pinwheel formation just outside the village entrance. I unlatched my 249 from the mount, undid my harness, and joined the rest of the platoon in our tactical column. We made our way past the little kids throwing rocks at us, and eventually came up to the village elder's house. It was larger than the others, with more rooms attached from nearly every side. Our squad leader told us to set up a cordon. Dan and I moved to the 6 o'clock apex, facing down the road over the sound of the wind. I could hear our LT talking to our translator, and then back to the elder. I'm sure it was something to do with what we saw the night prior, but all it sounded like to me was habadaba habadaba lek. I saw in the corner of my eye a little head poke out of one of the doorways. I smiled. Arya, get out of the road. I saw his tuft of curly hair bouncing down the road at me. He was around 9 years old and actually one of the few Afghans who spoke some English, although his translations came at a price. As he approached us, I reached into my cargo pants pocket and searched around for a small bag of sour Skittles from my MRE. Dan, take the gun while I talk shop with our informant. I chuckled as I rolled to my side and Dan hopped over to take my position. Hey kid, Hawa. Halwa? Hawa. That's what I'm leaving it at. You want talk for candy? I rattled the bag in my hand. He smiled and nodded his head. I tossed the bag to him. The mountain. Do you see people go to mountain? You see Taliban yesterday? I gestured with my hands in pretend sign language. He stared at me confused. Taliban. He shook his head aggressively. Mukif, mountain is too big, fall and die. I furrowed my brow. You see any Taliban with a torch? I mimed a flame with both hands. No Taliban here, no Taliban there. Djinn live in the mountains. He popped a handful of Skittles in his mouth and did an excited dance. Djinn? Like a genie from a lamp? Like Aladdin? Arya shook his head. He began flexing his arms, puffing his chest out, and standing on his tippy toes. Strong, big, strong men. Very old and very mean. Now, I don't mean to make too nerdy references in a video, because I know I mentioned webtoons and ORV earlier, but the word Jean just completely reminds me of Maggie, the anime. Anyone who hasn't seen that, completely recommend it. But yeah, that's the only time I've heard that word, and when I heard it, it was in Japanese, so I don't know how to pronounce that either. So sorry if I'm mispronouncing anything. How many, kid? How many of these are up there? Where do they live? I don't know. His face became serious. They steal the maeza. They steal atfal. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce these. I'm just trying. They eat us too. From cave. Big cave at top. On top. On top. He shoveled more Skittles in his mouth and crunched down hard on them. Thanks, kid. Get going. He ran away back into one of the shit houses. I looked over at Dan, and his eyes met mine from over the buttstock of my gun. There's definitely some hajis up there, bro. We settled back into our position and waited for another 10 minutes until our PL walked back out. We formed back up into our column and marched back to our vehicles. As I mounted my 249, I heard the blare of the radio as my team leader picked it up. Roger that. Good to go. Over. I tapped him on the shoulder as I leaned on my ring mount. What's the word? Village elder told the PL that there's a cave up there. It could lead somewhere else at the base of the mountain where Taliban could be coming up from. We're going to scale the mountain and wait for dusk to clear the caves. Fuck yeah! I beamed as I sat back and looked up at the mountain. Hopefully we could find one of the guys who was in charge of the insurgents, or at least knew more about it. This kid was clearly spouting off fairy tales like he'd heard from his mom and dad. There weren't genies or wizards here, same as in the U.S. There were just good men and evil men, and we'd find out which was at the top of that mountain and cut them in half with bullets if they threatened us. Looking back now, I wish it had just been some goat fuckers up there. Then there's another picture, which I will pull up again real quick. So, here it is. Looking at the other one right now. Hopefully you can see that. Looking at that other one right now. Once again, I assume this is actually the author and one of his friends is a real picture. Again, I think this is awesome that he's able to do this and that he is doing this, because showing real pictures makes it feel very authentic, and it makes it feel very cool. Like, it's awesome that this author knows what he's talking about here, because personally, obviously, I don't know a lot of this stuff, but the author's going to know exactly what he's talking about, and anyone who's been in the military is going to know most likely exactly what he's talking about too. Whether I'm translating it well through how I'm saying it, hopefully. But yeah, I think this is really neat. I think these pictures are cool. An author, again, I'll get the picture off my screen before I say it because it's important. But if you're watching, thank you for your service. Really appreciate it. Country needs people like you, so thanks a lot. But other than that, continuing on with the story. Chapter 3. Dirt fell. The Swiss seat around my waist rubbed against my thighs, cutting off the circulation. I pursed my lips. The 249 slung on my shoulder, plus my plate carrier, spare drum mag, and assault pack, added another 100 pounds to my kit. I felt my legs start to buckle as I made the last push to come up and over the edge of the cliff. More dirt fell behind me as I got to my feet and gripped my gun. I gave a quick nod to my team leader and met Dan behind some rock we used as cover. Fuck this goddamn Kevlar. I can't see shit. It was already nightfall, around 2300. The whole platoon was spread out in a sickle, with all sectors ahead of us having a muzzle trained on them. It had taken us 3 hours to make the climb, and most of that was spent waiting for the sky to darken enough so that we could get our rope set. Now that we were up here, it felt strangely peaceful. Some shrubs and tall grass decorated the mountain, interlaced with little springs of ancient rocks and shallow puddles. I could see why someone would make this place their home. As I was admiring the moon-shaded greenery, Dan tapped me on the shoulder and pointed a knife hand towards the path ahead of us. The platoon was postured on a small clearing surrounded by a crescent of reddish-brown earth. In the center was a darkened hole that wandered further up into the darkness. We slipped by silently, the rustling of our boots playing in sync with the wind. The path opened into a larger dirt road, around 20 feet wide. Our squad leader echoed the command of our LT to form a wedge. I moved to my right, and I could see the edge of the cliff to my side. And something else too. Game trails. Big game trails. Maybe it was a gazelle or a family of foxes. I had seen a few of them in the past month through my binoculars. The trails cut into the bushes and grasses, forming channels of dirt and rock that were hardened and stamped onto the earth. My eyes traced their black silhouette in the moonlight, and I saw as they gathered head at the base of a cave. The platoon froze as our LT put his fist in the air. He motioned 2 quick slaps downward, and we all took a knee. I kept my eyes fixed on my sector of fire at my right, but suddenly I felt cold. Goosebumps climbed down my neck and showered down every inch of my back before wrapping around my chest. My body began to shake as my eyes were drawn to my left, to the cave. Someone was watching us. I shot a glance at Dan, who did a quick crouch run to my position. What is it? I feel scared. It felt strange to say those words, but it was the truth. My eyes frantically darted around the darkness, trying to find some shape to attribute these feelings to, but there was nothing, just the wind blowing through the emptiness of the night and the buzz of cicadas in the desert. I closed my eyes and took a breath. I had to focus. Getting emotional is how people die. Even if there were 1,000,000 Hajis in that cave, I was going to take 100 with me before I died. I felt the courage return to myself. My team leader ran over to me. Weapon Squad and 3rd will establish a support by fire position on that berm adjacent to the mouth of the cave. 1st and 2nd are going to be set up here to begin our assault. We will assault in bounding overwatch until we hit the mouth of the cave and begin clearing. 2nd Bravo, us, will be taking the far right side of the objective. LT wants you, Dan, and all the other machine gun teams joining the support by fire line. I nodded my head and tapped Dan on the shoulder as we made our way to the berm. I plopped my 249 on the ground and checked my watch. It was midnight again. I looked at the stars and began to pray. My Lord Jesus, please keep me safe. St. Michael, protect me. I brought my head down in time to see the signal to go. The teams bounded forward like a flood of camouflage crashing towards the entrance. I traced their movements and saw them disappear into the cave's mouth. We sat there for what seemed like hours, my eyes adjusting to the darkness finally. My eyes scanned left and right, taking in shape of every bush and rock around the cave. Bush, rock, bigger bush, bigger rock, an even bigger bush. Foot? Dan, what is that on top of the cave? Silhouetted against the stars was the shape of a man, his legs straddling the top of the cave, his feet touching the ground on either side. Huge knuckles gripped the cave's mouth. Empty eye sockets stared back at me. He slithered back against the dirt, his belly scratching against the bushes. The cicada stopped buzzing. The cave was 600 meters away. The figure was as big as my hand, and it hadn't even stood up yet. In a symphony of metal clanging, we started to open fire. That chapter is pretty cool. It seems like they're finally in contact with the presumed Nephilim. It seems like he's pretty big. Yeah, just a little big. Huge knuckles gripped the cave's mouth. Empty eye sockets stared back at me. I think that's a terrifying description. That must be what John Jones felt when he was ducking Tom Aspinall. Like this guy. No, I'm sorry. No, yeah, but that is a scary description, especially if it's midnight, you're soldiers in a war, you're, expecting to find, Taliban, but instead you find whatever the hell that thing is. I'm excited to keep reading, so I'm going to go ahead and get straight back into it. Chapter 4. Night turned to day as flashes of fire from our barrels lit up the sky. I squeezed the trigger. The spray of carbon from the rounds and the heat of the barrel curved and bent the air in front of me, a kaleidoscope of darkness, fire, and smoke. Dan screamed over my shoulder as he fed the belted rounds into the gun. 11 o'clock! I shifted my aim and looked for the blur of the black shadow slithering between the bushes and dirt, 400 meters away. I squeezed down on the trigger again. Every fifth round in the ammo belt was a tracer, a beam of red lightning that arched across the field. Missed, 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 missed. Hit. The splash of the tracer round exploded against the creature, illuminating it in the darkness. The burst of flaming metal outlined a thickened, muscled chest decorated with wrinkled flesh, like a sun-baked rhino hide. A glimpse of its neck flashed in the darkness, then a jaw, then a mouth. Brown lips stretched across its face like two worn leather belts wrapped around yellowed porcelain. It smiled. Converge fire. Streams of lead rained down, peppering its skin with glimmering metallic jewels. 300 meters. A tree trunk of an arm shielded its face as it leapt forward in ungodly strides. 250 meters. Heavy clouds of steam plumbed behind it like a freight train plummeting towards us. Dan, blow that motherfucker up. 200 meters. Frag out. He lobbed a grenade into the air, 150 meters away. An explosion lit up the night sky for a split second, and a cloud of dirt swallowed the creature. We continued firing into the void. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All guns ceased firing. Silence. The LT screamed on the radio, breaking away from the handset just long enough to yell out, "Keep your fucking guns trained on that thing. There's more inside." I felt warm wetness seep down the front of my pants. I looked down in confusion and muttered quietly, "I'd just pissed myself." I gave out a half-hearted chuckle in disbelief. Alright, here. That may sound embarrassing, but there is no way in hell I would not wet myself if I was shooting at a fucking angel demon big-ass thing with the tree trunk of an arm, as it describes, with fucking rhino hide. They described it as fucking dried rhino hide. That's insane. So you think you get rid of one, and then the guy comes back and he's like, "No, there's more inside." Like, there's more? Fuck no. Okay. Alright, well, we'll continue on. But, yeah, no. Fuck that. That is awesome. I look back at the impact site, dust drifting down to the earth and settling on the ground, revealing 1,000 impact craters. It was gone. Wild shots rang out, muffled by screams. "What the fuck? What the fuck?" I whipped my head to the left. Nothing. My head swiveled right, my eyes failing to focus on the shape in the distance. I traced its outline up into the sky until my eyes met the creature's, 20 feet above me. It stood there in a freakish perfection. 2 pillars of flesh holding up a grisly chest, 2 stout arms reaching down to the earth, and a malformed head, a vacuous smile painted on below 2 glistening sapphires reflecting the light at me. It calmly raised its right arm up in the air, holstering a shape in the frigid night. In a smooth motion, it threw its hand forward. I felt a bolt of air pass my face, followed by the sound of earth compacting, water spilling, and hissing air. I looked to my left. A spear the diameter of my leg pierced Dan's chest, pinning him from his right shoulder blade clean to the front of his plate carrier. His eyes, unblinking agony. His body twitched and contorted, his arms and legs sharply stiffening and slowly curling, like a spotter caught in the middle of a flame. That right there is haunting. I know this is something that people in the military probably go through. Like, they see friends die. But I think this guy has it on another level. He saw his friend impaled by a fucking spear. Holy, okay. Not gonna get too distracted again, but holy shit. My mind struggled to make sense of what was happening, and I felt myself slip into hysteria. I clawed at his uniform, trying to pull his torso away from the wooden pole nailing him to the dirt. Tremors started up and down in my body as I turned back right. I picked up my .249, re-racked the bolt, shouldered it, and stood up, stumbling forward. Each step I took was accompanied by the steady rhythm of dull thuds against human pulp. The The creature was elbowing us into the ground. Each strike of its bone against ours was punctuated by the gurgle of blood and sloshing of organs spilling out of bellies. I started firing, 30 meters away. It paid no attention to my rounds as it began picking up the fleeing men in its hands. I saw Zavala fly into the air, his legs kicking furiously, while his head was ensnared by 5 giant fingers. He gave out a death rattle just before his head popped open. His brains fell like birthday streamers. I walked forward, just 25 meters away. I picked up the LT by an arm and a leg, plucking each from his torso like picking petals from a rose. The LT fainted. What was left of his limp corpse was hurled off of the mountainside. I walked forward, 20 meters away. The whites of its eyes were visible to me now. It grasped Hernandez by his plate carrier and shoved him into the berm over and over. Milky white fluid began pouring out of his ears. Its other hand grabbed his legs and folded him in half until the heels of his boots met the back of his helmet. I walked forward, 15 meters away. As its head turned to me, I aimed for its mouth and started firing. With each round that hit, a small burst of blood sprayed out of its throat. I shielded its mouth with a hand. I tried to dodge out of the way, but it picked me up by the chest. I gripped tighter on my gun as all the air was forced out of my lungs. I felt my ribs start to fracture, but I kept firing. Rounds danced up to its face. I saw its mouth wide open, and I felt its teeth sink into my left arm. A cacophony of bone cracking, meat scorching, and nerves burning overloaded my senses. My vision was starting to go. The image of the creature's face was now at the end of a never-ending tunnel. I jammed my .249 into its eye socket and squeezed as hard as I could. Putrid, warm blood splashed my face, blanketing me in visceral warmth as my eyes began to close. Darkness fell on me as I heard slow, labored breathing fade into the night. A heavy thud shook the earth. The cicadas started buzzing again. Alright, so I know I interjected a couple of times during that, but again, that was written fantastically. I think this author's very good at writing. The way he wrote this, kind of, again, hopefully I'm conveying it even slightly how I'm reading it. I know I'm not pronouncing everything right, whatever. It is for fun anyways. But no, this is fantastic. I'd like to hear, I think this is a story that would do well on Creepcast, assuming it's long enough for them. Maybe it'd go in a grab bag, but I'm sure it's due for them to come onto the new Reddit and actually read some stories off of it. So this is one honestly very cool story that I would like to hear. Right, but we're getting on to the final chapter. Chapter 5. Hey, bruh, get up, it's our shift. Light poured into my eye. My vision slowly returned, the fog in my head pulling back inch by inch until a room revealed itself around me. I squinted my eyes, my eye. Sensation returned to my face. The itchy, stiff caress of gauze clung to the left side of my skull. My hands crept up towards my eyes, a cocoon of sterile fabric encasing a stump where my left hand should have been. I started to weep. A rush of panic filled my body, flashes of what happened before, the smell of carbon, a shadow in the bushes, a monster in the moonlight, blood in the sand, and Dan. The image of him nailed to the ground burned in the back of my mind, and I sobbed. A team of army nurses rushed in, clad in a mesh of fatigues and scrubs. Everything is okay. You're in the BSA now. I balled up my fist and started swinging. I don't know why. I didn't want to hurt anyone, but I just couldn't comprehend where I was. A few more nurses rushed in and sedated me. I woke up a day later with a doctor looking at me. His face was round and rough, but his eyes were kind. He pulled up a chair at my bedside, looking up at me like I was his son. How you doing, Joe? Feeling better? Yeah, I just want to know what happened. Well, for one thing, you punched like a son of a bitch, he gave out a chuckle. I tried to laugh, but the fractures in my ribs stopped me. He smiled at me. Do you remember anything about what happened? I cleared my throat. I remember us setting up for an operation on a cave, and then I can't remember what happened. Well, you were on an operation attacking a Taliban outpost in Kandahar, and your platoon was ambushed, 3-to-1 ratio against you all. You had a frag grenade get thrown at you, but your AG flung himself on top of it to save you. You received damage to your arm and eye, but he probably saved your life. He paused and gave me a quick grin. His eyes flashed down to his hands, then fixed on me. You were the only survivor. You were in the coma for a week. My heartbeat quickened. A few other specialists were evac'd from your site, but they died during transport. You're very lucky. Tears started to well up in his eyes. Once you're all cleared from here, you're getting sent back home. He gave me a hard pat on the arm and stood up. If you need anything, just let us know. I stood there in my bed staring into nothingness for a while. Was I hallucinating? Maybe I did get blown up by a frag and imagined it all. I sat there wondering for days, the images in my head growing fuzzier as I held them up against the story I was told, until, eventually, I didn't know which was true. The next week, one of the feds arrived to take my statement of events. I told him everything I could before my mind totally forgot. I told him about the torch in the distance, Arya's fairy tale, and the 20-foot monster from the mountain that killed my best friend. All of it. I started trembling as the last words left my mouth. And then I woke up. After I finished, he took a long pause, tapped his papers against his knees, and looked at me. Thank you for your statement, specialist. Do you have any questions for me? I had stared at my hands, then looked him in the eyes. Did they find anything up there? His face was unchanged. I don't know. I'm not a field agent. What I do know is that there were Taliban reported in the area, and that you single-handedly stopped more of our troops from getting killed. Every time you look at your arm or feel that eye, I'd remember that you stopped it. He stood up. I'd focus on the fact that you survived, and that's a very lucky fact. He gathered his papers into his briefcase and left. True to that doctor's word, I was sent home that next month. I received a Bronze Star and MSM from my division commander, who made a 15-minute speech about how I was the example of what an infantryman should be, unyielding courage in the face of unbeatable odds. My mom and dad welcomed me home with a cake, balloons, and a banner that read, Our Hero. It took a while for me to go to sleep like a normal person for months. I'd wake up pissing myself every now and then. I hear Dan in my ear before my alarm goes off in the morning. Hey bro, get up, it's our shift. Sometimes I'd just stay up at night, thinking about the desert, shooting the shit with my friends. Dan spouting off some bullshit while I told him to shut up, feeding Arya Skittles like a stray cat, going to kill the bad guys with the boys, thinking we're invincible. I'd stare at this photo a lot, which I'll pull up real quick. Ta-da! Yeah, so this is the picture. It shows him and what looks like 4 of his friends. Once again, I know I've said this the other 2 times too, I would believe these are real pictures and his real friends, and I would assume this, where I'm pointing, is the real author. Once again, I know I said it last time, I do think that is awesome that he's able to use real pictures for this. Hey, maybe I'm wrong. I'm presuming here. Could be not real. But it's just awesome. It just brings another sense of authenticity. Other times, I just wonder why I survived. Why did God let me live? Whether it was a giant in the desert or 120 Hajis, people don't just live through that, do they? It's been over 20 years since that one night in Kandahar, and I've made peace with a lot of what happened. Made peace with nearly everything except one. I heard the LT say there were more in that cave. I know I killed the one outside, but what else was in there? How many were in there? And are they still in there? I searched the internet over the years for anything about what that thing on the mountain was. Nothing ever came up until this past February. I saw a video on YouTube pop up on my feed about the Giant of Kandahar. I clicked instantly. It told my story, except it wasn't about the 2nd Platoon. It was about a Spec Ops group. I would have been more furious, but they mentioned Dan. In their bullshit story, Dan still died. I don't know who leaked my story or why, but the video did give me one answer. It called the creature a Nephilim. I googled it and found this. The Nephilim were on Earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. Genesis 6:4. I don't think I'll ever get all the answers I want. To be honest, I don't think I really want them either. But every time someone asks me, "What's the coolest thing you've done on deployment?" I always give them the same reply. I think I killed a Nephilim in Afghanistan. That's the end of the story. That was awesome. That's one of my favorite short stories I've read on my own through Reddit, actually. There were some stories I've read, like trying to record this, that I read and I was like, these are alright. But this one, the imagery was great. The fact that it's kind of an authentic experience. Obviously, hey, I'm not trying to discredit you, author, but I do kind of doubt you met and killed a Nephilim in Afghanistan. But it's awesome that you know Afghanistan. Most of these experiences were probably built off a real life experience that you've had, and I just think that's awesome. Yeah, everything about this was sick. The description of the Nephilim, especially, was fantastic. I'm not sure if I hear them described as that sort of creature very often either. I don't hear a lot about them, but all I normally know is they're, the sons of an angel and a human. I think that's sick. That's just such a cool story. I think that this should have a little more, probably more fucking upvotes. Trying to understand these things on Tales from the Creeps. I don't normally see very high upvote things, but this one, let me check. It might be a winner of something. Let me scroll up real quick. No, doesn't look like it. Here, I'll check real quick and I'll. Okay, so it looks like it's not like winner of anything. It's not like a monthly contest winner, but right now it is featured in the community highlights, which that's where I found it. I thought I found it in the March submission thing, but that's Freak Boy Francis. But yeah, creature feature. That's awesome. It completely deserves to be there. Do really hope. Again, I'm not claiming to be any Creepcast. Creepcast is awesome. Again, love them. Listen to every single one of their episodes. I hope they read this, because I think they'd have some good input. I think they would have a good time reading it. And it seems like the author wants that too, because in the comments, I think he does mention it. Squeak, squeak. Yeah, I'd love for Isaiah and Hunter to give it a read one day. I completely agree. I would absolutely listen to that. That story was great. There wasn't a moment that I was reading it that I didn't want to be reading it. I wanted to keep reading. That's awesome. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and get on with a little bit of talk about myself again, which I love doing. I love talking about myself. No, I went to Buffalo Wild Wings today. I understand UFC's on Paramount Plus. We were watching on that too, after we left and everything. But watching, and oh my god, one of my friends got the hottest wings and ate all of them. What? It's miserable. Really funny, but it was, he couldn't have been enjoying that. And that last fight, oh my god. Yeah. Carlos Ulberg and Jiri, that fight was stupid. Oh my god. I don't know much about it, but I was with a friend, and I've seen clips on Instagram because, again, like most things, I guess, I'm getting into it recently. And what was that motherfucker doing? I was rooting for Jerry. I don't know if I finished saying that. But, dude, he blew out the motherfucker's leg. And then I get it was nice he wanted to give him a chance. But he completely fucked himself out of a title fight for no fucking reason. I don't get it. I don't know, dude. But, whatever. I still like him. That was just fucking stupid. And I think the only other good fight last night was the heavyweight fight. I don't remember their names. It was like I'm thinking Slasher. I don't think that's his name, but something like that. And the other guy, whatever. That one was fun. They got exhausted really quick, you could tell, but it was kind of a dog fight. Not the best one I've ever seen, but enjoyed it. And then the one with Paulo Costa. Yeah, Paulo Costa. I love that guy. He was in the first card that I ever watched too. And, yeah, no, he's jacked. Holy shit. There was no world where I can see him losing to that other guy. Especially after seeing that fight. But, whatever. Loved it. No, well, most of the fucking fight was pretty boring. Most of the fights. But those two fights were okay. Anyways, that is going to be all for today. Except for the 2-sentence horror story. Tricked you. Haha, be right back. Alright, I didn't read this one in advance or anything. I just went to the 2-sentence horror story Reddit. And I clicked on the March winners. And I went to 7th place. So, if you read all of them, sucks for you. Because why are you reading so many 2-sentence horror stories? But sick of my neighbor Danny's endless slurry of terrible puns, I beat him to death with a hammer and dumped his remains in the local Kawatuchi River to hide the evidence. So can someone explain to me why I keep hearing, "What are you doing?" and "Don't be so serious all the time, neighbor," and that horrific, nasally voice every time I turn on a faucet? Okay, I have totally heard that before. My bad. I don't know if I've read that before. That was a good pun. I came into it expecting that it was going to be a really good 2-sentence horror story since I went to the winners, but it was funny. I really wonder where I heard that. I don't know. But either way, that's going to be all for today. Hope you have a wonderful day or night. And I don't have an outro yet. I'll figure it out one day. Have a good one.